Welcome back. Before I do any more programming in my Bubble Bobble simulator, this is what it actually looks like when you are playing this game. I will post the link to the simulator in the video below so you can actually check it out. The reason I wanted to show you this is to give you a sense of what the gameplay actually is like, because then you'll understand what it is I'm trying to accomplish as I implement the code to make the characters move around the screen, to interact with things that fall, the enemies, all of that other stuff. And this is going to also get us into a discussion of the algorithms that I'm going to need to use to move my game forward. So let's load the game. That screen that I've already put into my simulation. So there's my character moving around. It moves right. It's kind of at a constant speed. It moves left. Same thing, and there are some enemies. There's a pickle up there. I want to be able to jump up from these different platforms. When I go over to the pickle, I get a little animation, and my score goes up. It should come to no surprise. I'm going to let one of these characters come up to the top platform. If I contact one, my character loses a life and is respawned at the bottom. So that's it. So with that, that gives you some information on how the game works. Let's now go and talk about that gameplay that you just saw and some of the ways that we're going to implement that in code using algorithms. So let's talk algorithms. It doesn't take long before your code starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you start to lose focus because there's so much there. There are some things you can do to organize your code, such as using functions. This is what we did in some of the example code in previous projects, where instead of having just all of this code to plot the platforms on the screen, you might move all of that code to a separate function called draw platforms. It keeps all of the platform code together, and it means that you can replace the code in your didMove function to just that draw platforms function. But even with those good habits, it can be a really good idea to think through what it is you want to have happen within your game and when. One effective way to do this without having to just write the code is to use something called pseudocode. And pseudocode is just a written description, sometimes using elements of the code language that you're going to be programming in, but it doesn't have to describe the variables, the logic, and the procedures that you're planning to follow within your game. Let's take a look at some examples. First, we'll look at SpriteKit in general and what it does as it's running your game. Simulates the physics of different sprites that have physics bodies. It looks for collisions. It might update properties. For example, within your did update loop that's constantly running within SpriteKit, you might check for conditions like how much time is left on the timer. Or if the character is moving left, you might want to show an animation that shows the character moving left. You want to check for events. And specifically for our games, you're looking for touch events. Is the user touching the screen? Has the user released a finger from the screen? Is the user moving a finger around on the screen? So look for those things and animate the frame. So with all of those things happening, actually draw everything on the screen the way it should appear to the user before looping to the next frame. This all happens very quickly within SpriteKit. It tries, I think, to do 50 to 60 frames per second to make it really responsive. And I may have some of the order wrong in terms of what SpriteKit actually does, but this is the basic idea. And this is my pseudocode for this. While the game is looping, for each frame, do all four of these things. Let's look at some pseudocode that we're going to be using for the algorithms that move the character Bob around the screen. So the first thing is, when the screen is touched, I want to figure out where is that location relative to the character. If I touch the screen to the left of the character, I need to give that character a negative velocity so it starts moving that way. Otherwise, I want to give it a positive velocity so that it moves in that direction. So if it's to the left, give velocity that's negative. If it's positive, give the character a positive velocity. The other thing that I want to do for this specific game is on the screen, if I want Bob to jump, I want to do that when the screen has a double tap. So if there's a double tap, I'm going to give the character a vertical velocity so that it jumps vertically. When the screen is released, so if I am no longer touching the screen, I want to stop Bob moving left or right. I might still want Bob to be moving vertically because he might be doing a jump, but when you take your finger off of the screen, I want that movement to just be vertical. This might not be what I want, but this is what I'm planning out just to get started. And you can see this is not necessarily accurate code. There's nothing inside SpriteKit that directly has the words when screen is released. This is the function touches ended, but that's a little bit harder to explain exactly what I want to have happen in the game. And that kind of detail isn't required for pseudocode. You could put it in there, but you don't have to. Let's also talk about contact events. And so when Bob contacted the pickle in the video that you saw before, you saw that the score went up and there was a little animation that happened when the item was removed from the screen, when the pickle was removed. And so within SpriteKit, I want to have that happen on the event when a contact occurs. Now, thinking about my knowledge about SpriteKit, I know that that occurs in the didBegin function. So this code I'm probably going to need to put inside the didBegin function because that's the function that handles contact between different sprites. And the other thing that I need to think through is that when Bob contacts an enemy, I need to take away one of the lives, I need to animate Bob spinning around, and I need to move Bob back to the bottom of the scene so that the user can start playing again. And so planning out your game using pseudocode is a really good idea because it centers, it focuses your attention to one task at a time. And if we can break down all of the different things we want to have happen within a game into these little fragments of code, then putting it all together is going to be a lot easier. It's also going to be easier to debug when we find that there are issues coming up in our code. Take some time as you are building your version of the game to think this stuff through, and we'll see you in the next video as we try to implement some of this in my playground. See you there.